Paste. You all di mana? Bilik masing-masing ke di mana?
Saya pun di rumah juga, Prof.
Saya dah balik kampung, Prof.
Okay. Di mana tu?
Saya asal Sarawak.
Oh, okay. Sarawak di mana?
Kuching, Prof. Dekat Kuching.
Oh. Hari tu saya punya postdoc pun balik Sarawak juga di Kuching. Kalau you kenal Cindy.
Tak kenal. Dia Iban
Apa dia?
Dia bangsa Iban.
Chinese ke?
Oh, Chinese. Tak kenal lah, Prof. Mungkin
Tapi
lepas
dia-
ni boleh kenal ke.
Dia postdoc. Dia bukan.
Oh. Dia student postdoc dengan Prof lah.
Dengan saya. Ong di mana?
Saya kat rumah, Prof.
Di mana tu?
Kudai.
Oh, Skudai. Kampung Skudai ke?
Kampus Kudai juga.
Tak pergi jauh lah. Okay, Skudai di mana?
Bandar Pulai Jaya. Prof tahu kan?
Pulai Jaya, tahu-tahu. Memang kampung situ?
Tak, dulu kat Taman U. Then
Oh, lagi dekat. Okay. Itri di mana?
Saya memang orang Taman U, Prof.
Agaknya student kat dalam ni semua Taman U kot.
Saya senang ulang alik je, so macam tu.
Taman U di mana?
鬼都听不懂。
Dekat area Jalan Pertanian.
Oh, pertanian. Okay.
Okay, Prof. Are you okay that we are starting now?
Okay, no problem.
Alright, Prof. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our second structured course. Before we start our event today, I would like to gently remind all of you to keep your mic muted. Thank you for your cooperation.
Okay. Saya pun tak tahulah ni sebab tiba-tiba.
Let us begin our workshop today with Umul Kitab Al-Fatihah.
Dengan Dr. Rodi. Hello?
May our program today be blessed and run smoothly. Levine, back to you.
Thank you, Fitri. A very good morning to our speaker, Prof. Dr. Azmi Aris, fellow committees, and all the participants. Once again, welcome to the Identifying Research Gap and Novelty through Literature Review structured course. I'm Lavin Wong, your moderator for today. For your information, this workshop has been organized by the Postgraduate Student Society, School of Civil Engineering, PGSS-SKA, with collaboration with SPS UTM. The main objective of this session is to expose students on how to develop research gap and novelty through literature review. Before we begin our session, we have our honorable speaker with us today, Prof. Dr. Azmi Aris, and I will give a brief background and introduction on him and his expertise. Prof. Azmi is currently a professor of environmental engineering at the University Technology Malaysia UTM. He obtained his PhD from the University of Manchester, UK, in the field of environmental engineering. He started his career at UTM in the Department of Water and Environmental Engineering, School of Civil Engineering 31 years ago. He was the head, Department of Environmental Engineering, Faculty of Civil Engineering, Director of the Center for Environmental Sustainability and Water Security IPASA, and is currently the Director of the Research Institute for Sustainable Environment, RISE UTM. Prof. Azmi works in the field of water pollution control with specific interests in wastewater treatment and water quality management. He is involved in various studies and consultancy works related to water security, funded by national and international agencies. He also served several national technical committees related to municipal wastewater management and has been appointed as expert reviewer by national funding agencies. To date, he has led research projects amounting to 10 million ringgit Malaysia, graduated 30 research students, and examined 55 students, internal and external at master's and PhD levels. He has also authored and co-authored about 200 technical publications and has served as reviewers for various publications. Once again, a gentle reminder to all participants to fill in the attendance form for your certificate. The link will be shared during the session in the chat box. Do take note, and if you have any questions throughout the session, you can raise up in the chat box or personally message the admin. Without further delay, let us welcome our speaker, Prof. Azmi. Prof. Azmi, please welcome.
Thank you, Levin. Thank you for the introduction. Let me share my slide, yeah. Okay, first of all, I would like to thank the organizer, Postgraduate Student Society of Civil School of Civil Engineering, for having me in this program. It is fortunate for me to be here to share my experience and knowledge with all of you. I believe I was informed that the audience are from various faculty and school. So I will try my best. Hopefully the information that I have here will be also useful for those. Although I have to start off with a disclaimer, mainly the talk would be focusing on those involved in science and technology research. In particular, because I was invited by PGSS Civil Engineering, so maybe the work is more on civil engineering, or in fact, the example which I have with me are more related to my work, which is on the environmental engineering. But I believe, regardless of the field, the essence of the talk will be applicable to most of you, except for a certain field, maybe on social science or those who are working with social science approach, maybe there will be some differences compared to this science and technology research. However, I think the spirit are the same when we talk about gap and novelty. And although the topic is identifying gap and novelty through literature review, I should remind you that this is not a literature review lecture, meaning that I will not be covering all aspects of literature review. only certain one which is very related on identifying the gap and novelty from the literature review. So I have about 1.5 hours or so to share with you my knowledge and experience. So hopefully that will be sufficient, and then we will have furthermore discussion after the break on from question and answer session. Okay, this will be the content of my talk. Just now I show you my disclaimer, what is the scope of my talk today, and then a little bit on the introduction, what is meant by gap and novelty, why are they so important in the course of your study, either master by research or PhD. And then we go into how to identify the gap and novelty from literature review. This is followed with how to write the gap and novelty statement, because from my experience, only having, if you have identified your gap and novelty, but if you did not state that gap and novelty properly in the beginning of your thesis, then that will be a problem for the examiner. So not only that you have to identify the gap and novelty, but you also need to state them properly at the beginning of your thesis. And a good thesis, I would say, is the one that when the examiner read your thesis, or anybody who read your thesis, they know immediately what is the reason of your research, what bring you to the research, what is your novelty, what is the gap that you want to fill up. This is the best thesis that that an examiner would expect. We don't want at the beginning of the examiner, when we read your thesis, we were wondering whether there is any novelty in your work, because novelty is one of the most important aspect in research, in your research, either master or PhD. And even if you want to publish anything in the journal, they will be looking at the novelty. That is the first thing that they will look at. So one thing is to identify, and the other thing is how to write that statement in your thesis or even in your publication. And at the end, I will conclude my talk with the summary of the important aspect of the talk. Okay, before that, maybe we would like to be clear what we are, when we do our PhD or MPhil, what are they actually? What is PhD and what is MPhil? Because why I think this is important, because even in some theses which I examine, there are some misunderstanding of what PhD and MPhil research is. The most important thing that we should understand is that PhD and MPhil is an academic research. Okay, it is an academic research. What is meant by academic research? Academic research is something where the research is done for in identifying to fulfill the gap of knowledge, where you contribute the new knowledge, and then the research should be designed properly. There should be an element of experimental design in your research, and then there will be something that you are searching for, some answer from your research. Your research work must be looking for something, and that something is the finding of your research, and that contribute to the body of knowledge. Meaning to say that it is not a project without research element. If you see, some people, they say, okay, they want to solve certain problem, and they are doing their work, the so-called research work in solving the problem. But unfortunately, there is no research element in that project. So that is not considered as research work. Okay, a research work must be a work that is searching for something as the finding. And last thing which I would like to remind everyone here, that although each of you is assigned with a supervisor or maybe more than one supervisor, the responsibility of doing the research and answering to the panels during your Viva is fully yours.
Macam tak balik.
Although you may be doing some work according to the this is being asked by your supervisor. Your supervisor say you do this and you do that. But at the end of the day, when the examiner asks you or the panel asks you, why did you do this? You cannot simply say, oh, because my supervisor asked me. No, that is not that is a very wrong answer to say. So although the work that you are carried out are being asked or being directed by your supervisor, still it is your responsibility to understand why that work is being asked by your supervisor. Why he asked you to do this, why he asked you to do that. You must understand why it's supposed to be done like that. Everything should be fully understood by you as a student, and the answer should be through your understanding on why it is being carried out in certain way, why you should do this, why you should do that. Everything must be coming out from yourself. Okay, so these are the three elements, I think, as a start, which I need to remind everyone that you should be aware of. Okay, this is a journey of PhD. You start off with your enrollment, and then you have your literature review, proposal defense. Once the proposal defense is being accepted, then you start to do your research work, seeing your results, and then you analyze your data, and then you start writing your thesis. In fact, thesis writing has started already when you do your proposal defense. At least your chapter 2 should be as complete as possible. Okay, in your proposal defense. So when you start, after you finish your data analysis, you will be concentrating more on your data presentation, your data analysis, and writing your thesis, your findings. And then after that, you submit Viva, and then if there is any correction, then you do your correction, and then your final submission. And if you pass, you will be awarded a PhD or master. So what we are talking today is something at the very beginning, which is on, although it looks like literature review, but actually one of the important component in literature review is to find your novelty, is to understand the gap of knowledge within that field. And once you get the knowledge, your output will be a novel one. This should be done at this stage, okay, at the literature review stage. And this will be asked during your proposal defense, and this will be asked again during your Viva. So this is your life as a PhD student. I do not know whether you are new or you are at the middle or towards the end, but I hope most of you will be at the beginning or maybe at the middle. In case if you have not identified your research gap, then there's still time for you to do so. And still, whatever work that you do, your research work, your data analysis, these all will go back to your research gap and novelty. Because if your work is not novel, then you will be having problem during the proposal defense, which is still early and can be rectified, but it will be a calamity if it is being notified during the Viva session. Okay, having said so, this is why identifying research gap and novelty is very important. As I mentioned earlier, and I want to stress it again, research gap and novelty is one of the things that will be initially asked by the examiner. Okay, if they found the research gap and novelty while reading your thesis, then you are in a good condition. But if they fail to find or you fail to state your gap and novelty in your thesis, then they will be scrutinizing that part, and you will be in big trouble if you yourself do not have not identified your research gap and novelty. Okay, so that is why identifying research gap and novelty at your very early stage is very, very important. Okay, what is a research gap? Simply said, it is a question or a problem that has not been answered, explored, or underexplored by any of the existing studies of research within your field. So this is the question that has never been studied before or never been explored before, and maybe underexplored. Underexplored means that people have done some research but very little on it, and there's more to be explored. And by saying any of the existing research studies or research, it means you need to look globally. It is not saying that, oh, the study has not been done in Malaysia or the study has not been done in my country. No, it has to be, it is global, it is globally. Okay, nobody in the world, whether in Japan, in developed country, in Europe, in the US or anywhere in the world, they have not conducted this study. So when nobody has never conducted this study or never did not explore the question, then that part of the unanswered question will be considered as novel. Okay, the keyword is that it has never been answered, nobody has ever done this, or if it has been done by some studies, the exploration of it is very little and you feel that there are there's a reason for you to explore that area again. So that is what is meant by research gap. So what contribute to research gap? What types of unanswered question can be considered as research gap? There are many of them. Okay, there are many of them. That is why it is not impossible to find research gap, although there are many studies being carried out throughout the world. But there are also some areas which are already congested. So if that area is already congested, maybe the gap is very small and the novelty is also very small. So you need to look into that so that you can have a good amount of novelty or gap that you want to do in your research work. One of the aspects is maybe the methodology. Okay, people have done different kind of methodology, but there is one method that you feel is nobody has done before, and you want to see if that method can also be used, and you feel your new method is better than those previously done. Maybe the method that you want to use is faster, or maybe it is cheaper. So that can be one part of research gap in the point of view of methodology. Or maybe experimental condition is different. Maybe previous research they have done, the pH is different, the certain pH, certain temperature, but you feel you should explore other pH or other temperature or other pressure or whatever experimental condition that you feel need to be explored for certain reason. Okay, that can also be considered as research gap and novelty. And maybe the specimen is also can be considered as a research gap. Maybe previously people have been from my field, maybe people have been developed certain treatment, wastewater treatment technology, but nobody has used that technology to treat this kind of wastewater. Okay, so I feel that treatment method is good because it is maybe less costly, or maybe it is more efficient, and I want to try to on this type of wastewater. Okay, or you want to other specimen depending on your field of work. And maybe the variable can also be changed. Okay, people have done on certain variable, they have looked into these factors, and these factors, but they have not looked on these factors, and maybe not many people have considered these factors, so that can also be considered as research gap. The test analysis also can be looked into. Okay, maybe previously people have done their research work using a certain type of experimental design, but you feel that maybe there is other alternative in doing so. For example, nowadays students like to work with research response surface methodology RSM, and under RSM there are also different type of RSM. Maybe people have done on this. Many people have done looking at this type of RSM. So you think that maybe you can try. You want to try some other RSM which you feel with this RSM the number of experiment is less. Okay, so these are the things that can be explored. Analytical method is also the same. Looking at different analytical approach for those who are doing experimental work. And population sample is also another approach for those who are working with social science, maybe in terms of size, in terms of type, in terms of location. In terms of location, I would like to add one more thing is that some students, they say that this research work has not been done in Malaysia. It has been carried out in other countries, but not in Malaysia. So the novelty of his work is it is being carried out in Malaysia because nobody has ever do it in Malaysia. So having location as the gap is not is debatable. It can be accepted, and to me it is not that acceptable. Unless you say I want to do it in Malaysia because why Malaysia is so different than other countries? Maybe because our climate is different, because our culture is different, because certain condition which can be characterized in general. So I want to see what happened if it is being carried out in this climate compared to those who being carried out. Most of the studies has been carried out in temperate climate. Okay, in Europe, in the West. So nobody has, or very little has been done in tropical climate or in equatorial climate. So that can be considered. That is a good acceptable justification for the gap and novelty. But by just saying, oh, because nobody has done it in Malaysia, but somebody has maybe do it in Singapore. We are having the same climate, or somebody has done it in Thailand or in Philippines. So what is the difference between these two countries? So we have to find the general differences rather than, okay, this is Singapore, this is Malaysia. That is, for me, not acceptable as a research gap. Okay, so these are some of the examples on what can be looked into when you are looking for research gap. So once you have identified your research gap, okay, then actually where your research novelty will be found. They are very much related. If you find research gap, then your research will be novel. If your research is not fulfilling the gap, so there is no novelty in your research work. And again, what is meant by novelty? It is contribution of new knowledge. It is a contribution of new knowledge. It is not new application. It is new knowledge in terms of new mechanism, in terms of findings, new things from your research work that has never been found by other studies or have never been addressed, being researched by previous study globally, not only in specific country or specific region, but globally. And it is very important that the gap and novelty should be well justified. If you see that people have never done on this area, so you want to do in that area which has never been touched by other people, so you must have a justification on why you are working on that gap. Because why? And that reason must be it must be justified from academic point of view. Okay, for example, a very simple example. If you go to the ocean, and you saw that within this area, there are so many people being fishing in this area. So you said, oh, in that case, because people are venturing, many people are venturing into this area, and this area seems to be very empty. So I think I want to go into that area, and I think there is novelty in that area. But actually, the reason behind why nobody is working in that portion of ocean is that because everybody knew that there is no fish in that portion area in that area. Okay, that is why they don't go into that area. So meaning that if you want to venture into anything new that has never been ventured by other people, you must have a good reason. For example, if people have been working with PH from 5 to 9, nobody has worked on PH beyond 9, so and you want to work on that PH, so you must have a justification, a scientific justification, a reason, a good reason why you should venture into that area of PH. It is not just because nobody has done it, then I will do it. That is not sufficient to justify your novelty. And that is also a very dangerous approach in looking into new area. Okay, you must have certain understanding. Okay, maybe if I use PH beyond 9, certain from theoretical aspect, it will be something better than anything below than 10. Meaning that there must be a good reason or a theory or maybe a hypothesis for you to venture into the area that has never been ventured by other researchers before. Okay, so the gap and novelty should be well justified by you before you agree that this is the place where I want to work on. Okay, so how to find your research gap and novelty? Actually, there is only one place to find it, which is through literature review. And in order for you to find your research gap and novelty, it is not an ordinary literature review. It's not like, okay, 30 literature, 30 articles, 40 articles. No, it has to be extensive and exhaustive literature review. Okay, maybe 100, 200, 300. The more number of articles that you review, you will be more confident on saying that, okay, I found the gap, nobody has done it, I have reviewed so many articles and I have clearly found that nobody has ever done this before. Okay, and again, going back to my previous slide, you must also be cautioned why people have not ventured into that gap that you were identifying. Okay, if you know that it is there is no reason that you should not venture into that gap, then go ahead. So to find research gap and novelty, it has to be through extensive literature review. Okay, which I will talk later on. But how many articles should I read? Actually, there is no definite answer, but I would say if you are just working on less than 100, I think that is not extensive enough, especially if you are doing PhD work. But it depends on the area. Some area they have lots of article on that particular subject. Some maybe there are not that many articles. So I would say it is not that the number that count, although to a certain extent the number also reflect the extensiveness of your research work, but it is how confident you can claim that nobody has done this. But then still goes back to how extensive your research review is. You say, like if you say, oh, I am confident that nobody has done this before, and then I ask you, how many articles have you read? 40. So I don't think that 40 articles can justify the extensiveness of your review, and with that, your confidence is not appropriate. Okay, so I would say that maybe something between 100 to 200 is a good answer to extensive research review, and then you can appropriately, confidently claim that you have found the gap of the research in your area. Okay. Now, how to find this? Before you find the gap or novelty of your research work, I think the first thing that if you are very new enrollment in your PhD work or master research work is to identify the area that you want to work in. Okay, because even in civil engineering or even in environmental engineering, even if you go to wastewater treatment, which is already specific, there are many type of wastewater. There are many type of wastewater treatment. So which one should I go into before I go deeper? So which field or which area should I work with?
Kena pilih.
Okay, so
tekan double click kat dalam tu, lepas tu kena
a very simple reason is that your supervisor asks you to do this. Okay, your supervisor asks you, okay, we should look into biological treatment process.
Apply, baru tak ada dah.
Or certain field, a certain area within your field. Why? It is being directed by your supervisor because the research is being funded.
Measure tu pun kena ubah balik lah.
And then you are being paid by that research fund. So this is very simple in terms of research area, meaning that you don't have to go around. It's already being specified already. So this, if you are lucky, you don't have to worry about finding the research area because everything has already been decided by your supervisor. But if nothing is being decided, you have your own idea. I want to do something. So it is based on your own interest.
Satu je lah.
Okay, it is based on your own interest. Because my interest is within this area. So I want to do research on this area. And then you go and see your potential supervisor and you ask him or her, can you supervise me? Okay, of course you have to know what is his area. If his area is not within the field that you want to work with, then obviously it is not supposed to be your supervisor. So you should have your own interest. This is the field. Maybe you are a lecturer in your university. So you come here with your own interest. You want to do this, this and that. So you come to your potential supervisor and discuss. But you have to be cautious on this because you have certain idea that you want to do. So the caution that you need to know is that whether that research can be done in that particular lab. Okay, for example, you want to do certain treatment process, but the equipment for that treatment is not available in that particular lab. In that case, if you still stick to that area of research or field of research, then when you get into the ground, when you want to do your experimental work, you will have problem because the equipment is not there. Or another approach is that you work with your supervisor for a new proposal. But the risk is that whether that proposal is accepted. You are lucky if that proposal is accepted and very unlucky if it is not accepted. And even if it is accepted, the problem is that there will be time lapse between the proposal, the acceptance, and until the money get into your supervisor before you can start your work. And then you have to order the equipment, all those required times. So it will it will prolong your stay in your research work. Okay. And another thing is that whether it is doable or not. Okay, it is this is something sometimes academically, of course, it can be done, but sometimes when you look at the practical aspect, this is the same as practical as well. Maybe it is not that practical. Maybe it is not sustainable. The things that you want to do is, theoretically in the lab is okay, but in the real world, maybe it is not practical. Okay, for academic research is okay, but you will be prepared. You must be prepared to answer on this practical aspect in your viva. Okay, so there's another way of how to find your research area. And once you have identified your research area, then you will start be looking at your gap and novelty. And once and this is done through literature review again. Okay, through the only one way to find this gap and novelty, which is through literature review. If you think that, of course, you can discuss with your supervisor, but there is a possibility that your supervisor may not be updated with the current state of the art in that field. So you yourself has to do the literature review, and at the end of the day, you yourself will need to justify to the panel that I have looked through all possible literature articles, and I can confidently say that nobody has done in this area, and my work is very good.
Bagi dua kan?
Okay. Although I said just now that this is not a literature review lecture, but I'm giving you some tips on literature review before we can identify the gap in knowledge.
Berat sangat talk dia.
So what is literature review? It is basically an evaluative report of information found in the literature related to the selected area of study. The review describes, summarizes, evaluates, and clarifies the literature. It gives a theoretical base for the research and helps to determine the nature of research. Okay, this is one definition from Queensland University, what is meant by literature review. From University of Toronto, it is an account of what has already established or published on a particular research topics by accredited scholars and researchers. So literature review need to be carried out in at the accredited articles or sources. For example, you cannot use newspaper as your source of literature review, because as we understand, there are many manipulation in literature in newspaper, and sometimes even the data being published in the newspaper is also incorrectly reported by the articles. Okay, so newspaper or things like that cannot be used. Best source of your literature review is article from journal, referred to journal, from conference, from report, but some sources do not give you the current situation of research in that area. So the best source looking at the current state of the art or what have been studied before is normally from the journal article. Even from conference is also not strong enough, because normally when you send your article to conference, because you have to pay for the conference, so the possibility of your article to be accepted is maybe 90%. But if you send article to journal to be published, especially it is a very good journal, Q1 journal, or even nowadays most of the journal, they will be looking into the novelty of your paper. They want to see, and you have to state in your article that your work has never been carried out before. There is novelty in your work. Then only they will accept your article. So this is the best source for you to look into areas or works that has been done by previous researcher, and that has been reviewed by reviewer and has been accredited by scholars and researchers. Okay, so that are basically the source of your literature review, and in order for you to find the novelty and gap of your research.
proportional 1.
Okay, what is the
Betul ke?
purpose of
Memang
literature
standard
review?
untuk application.
Okay, it's a critical analysis of existing research. Okay, you look at the existing research, you look what people have done in your field. You can identify what are the advantages and disadvantages, strengths and weaknesses of the existing research, and from there you can go towards into the looking at the gap of your knowledge. Okay, gain a critical understanding of your field, knowledge on what has been done in your field and the state of the art of the knowledge. Looking at similarities, differences, trends, and problems faced across the existing research. Okay. Sometimes there are many research being published and they are looking at almost the same thing. Okay, but maybe from different point of view. So from that you can gather all those information. And the most important part of literature review is to know what has not and needs to be done in the field. And this is the gap for your future research.
Lepas tu signal masuk.
Okay, this I mentioned just now. When you do literature review, there are many sources. For me, from books you can get basic knowledge, basic understanding of that field in terms of maybe some fundamental aspect is being discussed in books. And for journal publication, it depends on the age of the publication, in type of publication. There are old articles. Okay, sometimes the articles are very old, dated maybe in 1950s. They are a good article for fundamental knowledge. And then from old to new articles, you can see the development that took place in that particular field. And if you go into recent articles, maybe 5 years back, you can look at the state of the art of the area that you are working in. And one type of article which is very good to find the gap is to look at the review article. And this review article, they review previous articles on selected topics. Okay, so you can see that the articles they review previous articles, and then from that articles normally they will tell you what's missing and what need to be done.
Ini water source memang fix kan, selalu kita control yang
okay, some conference proceeding can also be used to look at the development and state of the art. But as I mentioned just now, they are not as good as the article published in a refereed journal. And of course, you can look at report, thesis, and other sources of information. Okay, some tips on conducting literature review. First of all, because normally we will look into something broader. One moment.
Kena buat sendiri ni rasanya. Dia tak boleh pakai yang ni. Ataupun ada dia bagikan kat dalam library, rasa macam ada yang
there's
ada
a garbage truck operating in front of my house.
Kena
So
tukar
I
lah
stop for
externally input
few seconds until they go.
kat benda tadi tu. Tadi ada kan? Externally generated. Ada tak?
Alright. Okay, sorry for the interruption. Okay, to start off, now when you start your literature review, I hope that you start off having known the field that you want to work into. Okay, don't start literature review without having anything in your mind, because then your journey will be too long. So discuss with your supervisor what are the areas that you want to work on, and then after that discussion, once you are confirmed what area you want to work with. For example, I'm working with wastewater treatment. There are many types of wastewater treatment. There are membrane technology, biological process. Even in biological process, there are many types of biological process. Okay, so you need to go into, okay, I want to do on, for example, in my case, I want to ask my student to work on biogranulation technology. So this one particular biogranulation technology. Or maybe some other supervisor, they want to look into membrane. So now you know, okay, I want to work on membrane. Then only you start working on your literature review. Okay, and how to look into your articles, you
Kena
don't
cari
go
paper lah. Dia
downloading
ada
all the
terangkan tu
articles
benda.
related to that particular area. Okay, look at the abstract first. Okay, look at the abstract first and see whether the topic or the article is something related to your field of and of your interest. Then only you download that paper. Okay, browse the abstract, look for relevancy of the article that is related
Tak boleh,
to
kena ada model
what you
linear.
want to do.
Yang ni model tak
And
linear.
then only you collect and collate that article. And categorize your articles accordingly. Okay, for example, if you're, for me, when I'm working with wastewater treatment in a certain area, there are many types of articles. Some discuss on the mechanistic or mechanism of the process. Some do modeling work on that process. Some looking into the variables or factors affecting that process. So there are different type of articles. So it is better, it is good for you to categorize that article into their own group, so that you know, okay, if you if you want to look into the modeling aspect, okay, these are the articles related to modeling. If you want to look for papers looking into the mechanism or then you go into those articles that are discussing on the mechanism. Okay, so categorize your articles. When you download your article, put it into a proper category so that you know where you want to search for that particular area. Okay, there are many type of database, Web of Science, Corpus, and you can check what is available in UTM library. And I think this is discussed further if you sit in your literature review class. I mean in your research methodology class, which discuss on literature review. Use tools or software that are available nowadays. There are many software available to categorize, even later on to do the formatting, all those such as EndNote, Mendeley, and Vivo, and many others. The one that you are familiar with, you can use any of them. So there is no preference. Each of them, I believe, has their own strength and weaknesses. Okay, when you read, be an active reader. Okay, don't read passively. If you read passively, you will be tired and you tend to sleep and it will get very boring. So by doing an active reading, you will be able to not only stay awake, but also you can read the article very fast. Okay, maybe you can read 3 articles in a day, okay, by active reading. So what is meant by active reading? Active reading is when you read actively means that you are looking for something. Okay, you don't simply just read, but you read with a purpose. Okay, you read with a purpose. Maybe you want to see how the experiment is being carried out. So anything which is not related with the experiment, then you can ignore it. Okay, so maybe when you read, you can have several purpose. Okay, not only for looking at the methodology, but also maybe I want to understand the mechanism. So read with the purpose. Okay, then just simply, why do you read? Because I want to read. Because I just want to read, and maybe from there I can find something. No, you have to put in your mind, to state in your mind, I am reading because I want to find blah blah blah. Then read actively, because you want to find something. Nobody try to find something while sleeping. You must stay awake if you want to find something. Okay, so be an active reader, and if you want to know what is active reading, you can browse at that website. I will share with you this slide later on. And one thing which I learned while doing my PhD is to learn speed reading, is to do speed reading. Okay, speed reading is very related to active reading. Okay, where you read with a purpose, and you can actually there are many type of speed reading. Some speed reader, they don't only want to browse, but they find the keyword, and that keyword they want to stick to their mind. Okay, so that is also there are ways to do it, and you can look at this website as well on how to do speed reading. But at least you will know, you, even if you may not be remembering of what you read, but at least you can read your paper faster. Okay, that is the purpose of active reading and speed reading. So
load connection ni betul ke memang macam ni?
from
Roto
this is
speed
what I
campur
learned
dengan
when I did my
variation
PhD,
jadi
to
top.
read
Macam,
faster, so that when in a week we can maybe 15 articles, 20
At least
articles.
kita
So
tak
if you can
pasti
read
lah.
15 or 20 articles in a week, you can imagine how many weeks you have and how many papers you can read. Okay, that is the importance of active reading and also speed reading. And a very important practice that you should also apply is to read multiple times. Okay, sometimes when we first read the articles, we don't quite understand what the article is about. Or maybe there are some points where we do not understand. Don't worry about that. Okay, don't worry about that. Just read, and then read as many papers that you can. And as you read, more information are being absorbed. Okay, you get to know many new things. And when you read that same article again, because you have absorbed, you know new things by reading different articles. When you read again the same paper, you will realize that there are other information that you did not recognize in your first reading. When you read it second times, you will find that, oh, there are new information. Your understanding will become better. And even if you read it for the third time, you will find that there will be some more information that you start to better understand, or you get from that the same article, which you at the initial stage was not that informative. Okay, so read several times, and then read broadly, I mean many articles, and then get back to the same article again, get back to the second article. So as you repeat it, so you will have a better understanding of your field. Okay, so these are some of the tips which I myself experienced while doing my PhD. And Alhamdulillah, with this, I think nowadays I can read a thesis.
So
Within 3 days, I can finish with one thesis. Okay, of course, I don't remember everything, but I know what the thesis is all about. Okay, so in previously there are many terms this critical term is being repeated again and again. So what is meant by reading critically? Okay, so when you read the articles, you would like to see what is the aim of the paper, of the articles, what is the research aims of that article, and how did they do their research, which is looking at the methodology. And in their discussion, did they mention any problem with their methodology? And when you do many readings with different, maybe you find people doing different type of approach, different methodology, then you can compare which method is better, and this with each other, and what are the benefit or disadvantages of this method. And from that, when you critically thinking of it, then you may come out with your own method, okay, which you feel is better than the method that has been carried out by previous researcher. Okay, so again, then you will see how does this article information will be helping you in your own research. What can you take from it? What should you not do, because sometimes they, especially in their discussion, they will also discuss on what their mistake is, or what are the things that they miss out. So these are the things that you can avoid when you do your research. And what, as mentioned just now, from this you will know what you can do differently from previous researcher. Okay, so you have done your you do your literature review, and how does from that literature review you can identify your gaps? There are simple way of actually identifying the gaps, and of course it is through literature review. First of all, you need to familiarize with all the studies that have been conducted in your field. Okay, for example, if you are working on biogranulation, familiarize with all the you have been collecting articles related to the biogranulation technology, and you know researcher has done what and what. Okay, what have they done in that field? What methodology have they used? What factors have they looked at? What are the analysis that they have carried out? So familiarize with all this while doing your literature review. And then you yourself, while reading all these articles, you may have questions that has not been answered from the articles. So write that down. Okay, write that down, and maybe when you have that written, and then when you go to other articles, then maybe later on you found that, oh, this question, the one that I have now, has been answered by other articles. So there's no gap on that. Okay, but keep your mind active, thinking of what, why, when, all those things, and see whether that question has been answered or not as you do the review. And remember that the articles that you read, as I mentioned just now, different ages, looking at the old articles, looking at the intermediate articles, and going through until the recent article. And then look at the suggestion for future research in the articles. Okay, sometimes, especially in the review paper, they have a section future research. Okay, look at that section. Or even in the articles, they may be telling you that things need to be explored further. Okay, so keep this in mind, write it down, and see whether that is applicable in your research. Okay, look at the suggestion for future research and see whether they have been answered as you review until, for example, 2021. So if that is not the answer, if that has not been answered, so there is a possibility that that will be the gap of knowledge that you are looking for. Okay, make a summary table of the gap that you found and discuss with your supervisor. And you need to update your literature review continuously. Let's say you start your PhD or master in 2019. Okay, you have reviewed articles extensively in 2019, but unfortunately you submit your thesis in 2022. Okay, so you need to update your literature review until 2022, hoping that the gaps that you found in 2018 is still valid up to 2022. Because if it is not valid, it is somebody has already, the gap that you identify in 2018 has been filled up by other researchers at 2022. Then you need to think further what can be modified in order that gap to still valid. That is how later on you express in your statement of gap and novelty. Okay, so update your literature review continuously and be aware of what the state of the art is changing as the year progresses. Okay, this is an example of review article by my student. this is a review article by a master student accepted in Q1 journal, yeah, Q1 journal. And here at the end of this review paper, not normally, it is a must. At the end of a review paper, there will be conclusion and future work. So if this article is recent, which is 2021, so meaning that this future work is still valid because it is current. But if the review paper is 2015, you have to investigate further whether that suggestion is still valid or not. Maybe after 2015, some researcher have conducted a new study and has answered the question or the gap presented in the review paper. And also important for me to stress that when you write your gap statement or your novelty statement, that statement or discussion should be based on the latest article. Should be based on the latest article. If possible, if you are submitting in 2021, it should be based on the paper of 2020. You can also, unless there is no new articles after that, maybe you said your cite article in 2016, and the reason why you cite it 2016 is because after 2016 there is no work being done. Okay, that can also be done, but you must be able to justify that. Okay, this is a review paper. This is another review paper as well, and as you can see again, there is a conclusion and research needs. Okay, this is also quite recent, into 20. Oh no, this is 2020. And okay, so you go through what are the research needs here, and then this is in articles, and if you look carefully, this is the first statement, blah, 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 blah. But here it says, however, concise conclusion can only be drawn when further studies are conducted to identify the microbial population in the aerobic granules. Meaning that this is something that need to be done and can also be your gap of knowledge. Okay, so when you read, okay, consider all these statements. And if it is recent, then that can be the gap of knowledge. If it is older articles, then write it as the potential gap. But then as you review newer articles, check whether that gap is still valid or not. And a very important thing for you to do, not only that you need to identify your novelty, but you need to establish your novelty as well, so that people cannot overtake you. Okay, once you claim that that is the novelty, but once somebody has published articles related to your novelty earlier than you, then your novelty is no longer valid. So in order for you to establish the novelty of your work, what you need to do is to put an early publication of your finding. Okay, you found that nobody has done on this, so you did your research on this, so publish it quickly, as soon as possible. So you put a mark on that, so I am the first person who has worked in this area. Then people cannot claim that novelty as theirs. So maybe you may ask, what happened if during my research somebody has published? So if that happened, then you have to tweak to do some modification in order the modification may not be too big. You can still work on what you have done, but maybe to inculcate something which was not carried out by that particular researcher. Okay, so it is very important for you to, that is why you have to do continuous review so that you know what's happening in your field of study. Okay, once you have identified your gap and novelty of your study, you also need to tell the reader your gap and novelty. Okay, this is what I call gap and novelty statement in your thesis, and also it is nowadays required in your publication. So it is not but this is the one that is something missing. That is normally missing in many students. When I read their thesis, it is not explicitly mentioned in the thesis that this is the gap that I am working on and this is my novelty. It is not mentioned. So when it is not mentioned, then when I read the rest of the thesis, the big question is this something new? Is it worth of a PhD? Is it worth of master by research? Because if I browse through once I have the paper the thesis, I will Google through looking at the work being carried out in this area, and I will check whether there is a similarities of work that has been carried out by previous researcher. Okay, so it is very important for you not only to identify the gap and novelty, but you also need to write it down in a proper statement in your thesis or in your publication. Okay, so this is normally carried out in the chapter 1 in your introduction. So a typical chapter of introduction is you have introduction, maybe preamble or what you call it, or overview, and then you have your problem statement, objective of study, scope of study, and arrangement of chapter. So what you should write, introduction, actually you introduce the reader to the subject matter from general or broad, and then you narrow down and more focus to the issue or problem that you are working with. Okay, this is introduction. And then in the problem statement, although the title is problem statement, it is not where you discuss about the problem that you want to solve. Discussion on the problem that you are looking at is in the introduction. But in problem statement, it is more on discussing what people have done in that specific field, what are the gap of research, and then you conclude it with the novelty of your study. For example, I am working with biogranulation to solve textile wastewater issue. So the problem of textile wastewater is being discussed in the introduction. And then I talk a little bit about biogranulation. But then in problem statement, I don't discuss about the textile wastewater anymore. What I discuss here is about what people has done related to my biogranulation work, what people have done and what people has not done. This need to be explicitly mentioned in this problem statement. Okay, many times what I found in the thesis is that students are explaining about the problem that they want to solve. You see, the problem that you want to solve, actually sometimes maybe for example, if I want to solve a problem related to textile wastewater, it is not because there is no technology to solve this issue. The problem of not solving this issue is maybe the cost of the treatment is very expensive. That is why people in Malaysia is not using it. But people in other world may have already used it. Okay, people in US, maybe in Europe, they have already used it. But in Malaysia, because it is too expensive for us, we are not using it. So the problem is not because there is no treatment. So in the problem statement, okay, so in the problem, so you can address the issue of cost of the technology. But in the problem statement here, you will be looking specifically into your gap of research. What people have not done related to textile industry, wastewater, but very specific with regard to biogranulation technology in my example. Then you come out at the end of your statement, the novelty of your study. For example, okay, this is the problem statement. So you see, I have already highlighted this with the yellow highlight and green. So the yellow is the state of the art. Okay, remarkably, most study in granules have been carried out in lab scale. Only recent years there has been interest in developing in pilot scale. However, far too little attention has been paid in cultivating biogranules with real wastewater in pilot scale. Much of the research now has been focused on domestic wastewater and synthetic wastewater, observing significant differences between pilot and lab scale results. So, what are the state of the art? What are the problem? And then specifically mentioned here that this indicates a need to understand the process in pilot scale reactor using real wastewater in relation to blah 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 blah. Okay, you state the state of the art, what people have been doing, what are the gap, okay, and then you mention explicitly on the gap at the last statement. At the last statement of the paragraph. And then there's another paragraph. Okay, moreover, blah, 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 blah. Most of researchers investigating co-substrate have utilized blah, 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 pure substance such as glucose, ethanol, and acetate. Only couple of researchers has introduced biodegradable industrial wastewater as co-substrates. Hence, it is needed to evaluate the feasibility of other readily biodegradable wastewater as co-substrate. So this, again, the state of the art. And this is the gap, number 2. And this is third state of the art, different topic and different looking at different area, okay, using dye degrader microbes, using microorganism. However, there have been no control studies. So then we mention on the gap. So 3 different paragraph, each paragraph has the state of the art. At the end of it, there's a gap. Okay, and then after that, we state the novelty study, novelty statement. This is the last statement in that problem statement. The present study is regarded as the first study dedicated to the development of biogranules using actual textile wastewater in the pilot scale reactor. So this is the first one. And then additionally, sewage and pineapple wastewater was tested as potential co-substrate. Just now we have already mentioned the gap. So now this is, we mentioned the novelty statement number 2. And then the influence of external dye degrader, the third gap that I mentioned just now. And we stated the novelty statement at the, so 3 gaps and 3 novelty. And then this gap and novelty statement are being translated into objective. This is objective related to gap number 1. This is objective gap number 2. This is objective for gap number 3. And this is a very small objective. I mean, basically they have looked into pilot scale, but now we want to compare the biogranule developed in the pilot scale against those developed in a lab scale reactor. Okay, there is some novelty here, but not as strong as the first 3. Okay, and then in chapter 2, okay, so how do we phrases our gap? Okay, for example, this type of term should be used. Okay, has not yet been clarified, have not been studied, reported, elucidated, is required, needed. The key question is, or it remains unsolved or not discussed yet. So because of that, it is important to address blah blah blah. So these are example of gap phrases that you should have in your problem statement after you discuss the state of the art of the field. Okay, and then the novelty phrases is basically you want to tell the audience how you attempt to address the gap in your research. And normally it is done in a new paragraph and should be accomplished in one summary statement or maybe two is okay. For example, the one that I show you just now, or this is another example. Therefore, the purpose of the study was to determine the effects of lead on blah, 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 especially on the liver and blah, blah, blah. Okay. So this gap statement and novelty need to be in the problem statement of your thesis. And if you are publishing, that this gap statement and novelty need to be in the introduction of your paper. Okay, so that people see the novelty of your work. And if you are working on review paper, it is important for you to look at all the review papers that have been published. And then you must find, if you want to write a new review paper, your review paper must have novelty that has not, in the field or in the area that has not been covered by other review paper. If the area has been covered by other review paper, then there will be no novelty in your review paper and it will not be accepted by the publisher. Okay, I have 10 more minutes. So another point where you want to state your literature, your novelty and gap of knowledge is in the literature review. At the end of your literature review, I suggest you to put a conclusion which conclude your literature review, a little bit, a very brief summary, and then state the gap, highlight the gap that you need to be addressed. And this gap does not necessarily all being covered by your study. Maybe through your literature review and discussion, you found many gaps. But because of your limited time, you won't be able to cover all the gaps in your work. That is fine. But at least the gaps that you pointed out in your literature review, in your chapter 2, at the end of your chapter 2, some of it are being covered in your study. Okay, so this is a conclusion. This is state of the art. And again, this is the gap. Nevertheless, the research in this area has been mostly performed using synthetic wastewater and mixture of certain dyes in lab scale. Research employing real textile wastewater is apparently sparse. So this is at the end of chapter 2. Okay, when you do your Viva presentation or your proposal presentation, you won't be able to share everything like you did in your thesis. So this is an example of what you can do to highlight the novelty and the gap and the novelty of your study. Okay, for example, this student is working on membrane. This is study on membrane performance, low temperature, room temperature, high temperature. These people have done on this. We did some more a little bit, but there's nobody done on the drastic temperature change. So this is my novelty. Okay, so people have done membrane application at high temperature on industrial wastewater. Nobody has done on domestic wastewater. So this is my novelty. And people have done on room temperature. Okay, sorry. This is high HRT, hydraulic retention time and activated sludge properties. People have done on room temperature, but nobody has done on high temperature. So with regard to this activated sludge property. So my study contribute to this novelty. So this is another way of presenting your novelty to the audience so that they can clearly see what is your contribution to knowledge from your research work. Okay, as I mentioned just now, I just want to highlight again that gap and novelty should also be stated in your journal publication. So as a conclusion, okay, this is my last slide, the conclusion. Gaps and novelty is a must in PhD and MPhil research. And also I want to add also in your publication. Okay. It is a must. It must be identified and it must be stated. Okay, it is identified. They are identified through a vigorous, exhaustive, extensive, and systematic literature review. So only through this approach you will be able to identify your gaps and novelty. And then once they are identified, they need to be spelled out explicitly in problem statement and end of literature review chapter. Okay, not only that you have identified them, but you also need to state them in your thesis and also in the introduction of your publication. Okay, and then once you have identified your gaps and novelty, the objective, and all the research work that you carried out will need to correspond to the gaps on a novelty that you have stated earlier. It cannot be you are saying gaps and novelty in certain areas, but then your work does not answer or does not fulfill the gap that you have identified in your problem statement. That is very wrong. Okay, so gaps and novelty need to be answered through your objective and also research work that you carried out in your study. And of course, all this you need to discuss with your supervisor and agreed by your supervisor. And if there is any discussion that need to be carried out, you need to discuss with your supervisor with evidence so that you can convince him on your gaps and novelty that you're proposing. Okay, I think with that, I end my talk today, and I hope I provide certain information that is very useful for your research work. Either you are starting your research work, or even if you are at the middle of your research work, even if you are at the end of your research work, or you are writing, then you still need, hopefully it can be used, inshallah. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Azmi, for the very fruitful session on knowledge sharing and experience on finding our research gap through literature review. As you mentioned, I believe that different phases of us will find this sharing very insightful because we need to keep ourselves updated from time to time. So personally, I was also reminded and give me more thorough insight on how to find my novelty in my research. As for everyone, I believe that everyone is excited to ask many questions. So we will have a short break for now to catch a breath. And for your inquiries, we will continue in our next discussion session. Okay, for now, we will have a 5 minutes break and we will be back at around 11:33. During this time, please leave your questions for discussion in the chat box. Again, a gentle reminder to all participants to fill in the attendance form for certificate and slide dissemination. So if you are interested in the slide, please remember to fill in the attendance form as we will attach the slide in your email. Okay, you may find the link in the chat box. So once again, this reminder, and for now, we will have a 5-minute break. We will come back at 11:33. 11:33 to have our next session for Q&A. Okay, so see you all in 5 minutes time.
Okay.